Archangel Michael says, "Heaven has been knocking, open the door now," before the knocking grows quieter and eventually stops altogether, not because the message itself has expired, but because you have grown so accustomed to the sound that it has simply faded into background noise you no longer consciously register. Stay with this message a little longer than you might normally give to something like this. Something has been trying to reach you, gently, persistently, for some time now, and today, finally, is the day this message is asking you to actually open the door rather than continuing to let the knocking pass by unanswered the way it likely has on previous occasions. Breathe slowly. Let your body settle into stillness for these next few minutes. Whatever noise or distraction has been filling your days recently, set it aside now, because what this message describes deserves genuine attention rather than the passing, half-distracted engagement most content receives during an ordinary busy day. Here is what this knocking has actually looked like in your own recent life, described specifically rather than left as vague, abstract spiritual language that generates emotion without offering genuine understanding of what is actually being asked of you. It has likely shown up as a persistent thought or feeling that keeps returning despite your best efforts to set it aside. It has likely shown up as a specific person, situation, or opportunity that keeps resurfacing in your awareness, without any obvious external reason for that resurfacing to keep happening. It has likely shown up as a subtle but persistent sense of restlessness or dissatisfaction, present even during moments that should otherwise feel content or settled. Consider which of these forms, or something similar, has felt most present in your own recent experience. A returning thought you cannot quite shake, no matter how many times you have tried to dismiss it as unimportant or impractical. A specific person who keeps entering your mind unexpectedly, perhaps someone you have lost touch with, or someone new who seems to keep appearing in conversation or circumstance without clear explanation. A persistent restlessness that has made even genuinely good moments in your life feel somehow incomplete, as though something significant remains unaddressed beneath the surface of your daily functioning. Give yourself genuine time with this reflection before moving forward, rather than rushing past it toward whatever comes next in this message. Sometimes the most significant knocking is not the loudest or most obvious, but rather the quietest, most persistent presence, easy to overlook precisely because it has become so familiar through repetition that it barely registers as something requiring genuine attention rather than simply another ordinary background thought among countless others. Whatever specific form this knocking has taken for you, hold it clearly in mind as you continue through this reflection, because this specific experience is likely the door this message is asking you to finally open. Here is why this knocking has persisted for as long as it has, rather than simply fading away the way many passing thoughts and feelings eventually do on their own. Some inner promptings genuinely are passing, disconnected from anything particularly significant, worth releasing without much additional consideration. But other inner promptings persist precisely because they connect to something genuinely significant, something that continues seeking your attention specifically because it matters, because some part of you already recognizes its significance even while another part continues finding reasons to postpone genuine engagement. Distinguish, as honestly as you can, whether what you have identified feels more like the first category, a passing thought without much deeper significance, or the second category, something that has persisted specifically because it connects to something genuinely important currently trying to reach you. This distinction often becomes clearer through simply asking yourself how long this particular thought or feeling has actually persisted, and how consistently it has returned despite your attempts to dismiss or ignore it. Genuinely passing thoughts typically fade relatively quickly once dismissed. Persistent knocking, the kind this message is specifically addressing, tends to return again and again, regardless of how many times it has been previously set aside. Here is something worth understanding about why opening this particular door matters significantly, rather than continuing to leave it closed indefinitely, as has perhaps been your pattern up until this point. Whatever specifically is knocking, whether it involves a relationship, a calling or purpose, a piece of unfinished healing, or some other significant matter, tends not to simply disappear through continued avoidance. It typically persists, sometimes growing gradually more insistent over time, until it either receives genuine attention, or circumstances eventually force a more difficult confrontation that could have unfolded more gently had it been addressed earlier, while genuine choice remained fully available to you. Consider a specific example from your own past, if one comes to mind readily, where something similarly persistent eventually either received genuine attention or was forced into confrontation through circumstances beyond your control. This kind of reflection can help illustrate concretely why proactive engagement, chosen deliberately while you still retain full agency over how and when to address the matter, tends to prove significantly more manageable than delayed, forced confrontation that arrives on someone else's timeline rather than your own. Reflect on how much energy this persistent knocking may have already been consuming, quietly, in the background of your daily life. Energy spent trying to ignore or dismiss it. Energy spent constructing reasons why now is not the right time to address it directly. Energy spent simply carrying the weight of something unaddressed, present even during moments when your conscious attention was focused elsewhere on other matters entirely. This energy, once released through genuine engagement with whatever has been knocking, becomes available for other purposes that have likely been quietly starved of your full attention and vitality precisely because so much has been consumed maintaining the avoidance of this particular matter. Here is what genuinely opening this door actually requires, since simply acknowledging abstractly that something has been knocking, without concrete engagement, accomplishes relatively little toward actual resolution. Opening the door requires naming, specifically and honestly, what this knocking has actually been about, rather than continuing to leave it in the vague, unexamined territory where avoidance tends to prefer keeping it. If your knocking involves a relationship, name specifically what that relationship needs from you right now. Perhaps reconciliation, reaching out to someone you have lost touch with or had a falling out with. Perhaps honesty, finally addressing something that has remained unspoken within an existing relationship. Perhaps release, acknowledging that a particular relationship has run its course and deserves honest closure rather than continued ambiguous maintenance. If your knocking involves calling or purpose, name specifically what that calling actually is, in concrete terms rather than vague, general longing for something more meaningful. What specific work, creative pursuit, or form of service has been quietly calling for your attention, deserving more serious consideration than the passing dismissal it has likely received up until this point? If your knocking involves unfinished healing, name specifically what wound or pattern has been asking for attention. A specific past experience never fully processed. A specific pattern in how you relate to yourself or others that continues causing difficulty despite your awareness that something about it needs to change. Specificity here transforms vague spiritual language into something you can actually work with directly, rather than something that simply generates emotion without ever translating into genuine, concrete engagement. Here is something worth understanding about why this message insists on immediate attention, asking you to open this door now rather than continuing to postpone that opening towards some indefinite future point when circumstances feel more convenient or you feel more fully prepared. This particular kind of persistent knocking rarely resolves itself simply through continued waiting. It tends instead to continue, sometimes growing quieter and easier to ignore for periods of time, only to return again with renewed intensity, until finally receiving the genuine attention it has been seeking all along. The longer this particular door remains closed, the more comfortable that closure tends to become, not because the underlying matter has genuinely resolved, but because avoidance itself becomes an increasingly practiced, automatic pattern, making genuine engagement progressively more difficult to finally choose. Even as the underlying cost of continued avoidance likely continues accumulating in ways that may not be fully visible from where you currently stand within this ongoing pattern. Consider what specifically has made this particular door so difficult to open up until this point, beyond simple inertia or busyness. Sometimes fear underlies the difficulty, fear of what genuine engagement might require you to subsequently change, fear of how others might respond, fear of discovering something uncomfortable about yourself or your circumstances that you have been avoiding through continued postponement. Sometimes uncertainty underlies the difficulty, not knowing exactly how to begin, what the first step should actually look like, leading to indefinite postponement simply because a clear starting point has never felt fully available or obvious. Understanding which of these, or some combination of both, applies most accurately to your own specific situation can help you address the underlying obstacle more directly, rather than simply continuing to encounter the same resistance repeatedly without ever examining what specifically produces that resistance in the first place. Here is what a genuine first step toward opening this door might actually look like, concrete and specific rather than remaining abstract encouragement that fails to translate into any actual meaningful action. If your knocking involves a relationship, this step might be sending one message, making one phone call, or simply deciding, clearly and specifically, what you actually want to communicate, even if you are not yet ready to communicate it directly to the other person involved. If your knocking involves calling or purpose, this step might be spending 30 minutes today actually researching or exploring whatever specific area has been calling for your attention, moving from vague longing toward concrete, specific information and possibility. It might mean simply writing down, clearly, what this calling actually involves, transforming a vague, half-formed sense of longing into something more concrete you can actually begin working with deliberately. If your knocking involves unfinished healing, this step might be scheduling time with a therapist or counselor if that feels like the appropriate resource for whatever specific matter has been persisting. It might mean simply sitting with the specific memory or pattern honestly, for a few minutes, allowing whatever feeling arises to be genuinely felt rather than continuing to be pushed aside through habitual avoidance. Whatever this specific first step turns out to be for your own particular situation, notice that it does not need to be large or dramatic in order to represent genuine movement. Opening a long closed door often begins with a small, initial crack, rather than the door swinging fully open all at once. This small beginning matters significantly, representing real engagement rather than continued postponement, even if the fuller resolution of whatever has been knocking still requires considerable additional time and effort beyond this initial step. Here is something worth understanding about doubt, since doubt likely has arisen at some point during this reflection, questioning whether any of this genuinely applies to your own specific situation, or whether it is simply generic spiritual language offered broadly without genuine connection to your particular life and circumstances. This doubt deserves honest acknowledgement rather than dismissal, but it also deserves examination rather than automatic acceptance as the final word on the matter. Consider what specifically underlies your own doubt if it has arisen during this particular reading. Sometimes doubt reflects genuine, careful thought, a real examination that concludes this content simply does not connect meaningfully to your actual circumstances. This kind of doubt deserves respect, and if this genuinely describes your own experience, you are free to set this message aside without any further obligation to force artificial meaning where none genuinely exists for you personally. But sometimes doubt reflects something else entirely, a reflexive, almost automatic skepticism that arises specifically to protect against the vulnerability and potential disappointment that genuine hope and engagement always carry with them. Notice whether your doubt connects to genuine, careful consideration of whether this message's content actually applies to your specific situation, or whether it reflects more general, habitual skepticism toward anything framed in explicitly spiritual language, regardless of its actual specific content or potential relevance. Both forms of doubt deserve consideration, though they call for somewhat different responses. If genuine examination suggests this content does not actually connect to anything significant in your own life, that conclusion deserves respect. But if habitual skepticism has prevented genuine consideration from occurring at all, holding that skepticism a little more loosely might allow this reflection to offer whatever genuine value it might actually hold for your particular circumstances. Here is something further worth understanding about the specific quality of persistence this particular kind of knocking tends to have, distinguishing it from ordinary passing thoughts that carry no particular significance. Genuine knocking, the kind this message is specifically addressing, often carries a distinctive emotional quality, something felt as meaningful or significant, even when the specific content of what is knocking remains somewhat unclear or difficult to fully articulate. Notice, too, whether this particular knocking has shown any tendency to intensify recently, arriving with somewhat greater frequency or emotional weight than it may have carried during earlier periods when it first began appearing in your awareness. This kind of intensification, when present, often suggests that whatever timing considerations may exist regarding this particular matter are becoming increasingly relevant, worth taking seriously rather than continuing to assume indefinite time remains available before genuine engagement eventually becomes necessary or appropriate. Reflect on whether this particular emotional quality, a sense of significance or meaningfulness distinct from ordinary passing thoughts and feelings, has been present in your own recent experience regarding whatever you have identified throughout this reflection. This emotional quality itself serves as additional evidence worth taking seriously, complementing rather than replacing careful, honest thought about whether genuine engagement with this particular matter deserves your immediate attention. Here is something worth understanding about patience during this process of opening what has remained closed for some time, since genuine engagement does not necessarily require complete resolution within a single moment of initial attention. Opening a door that has remained closed for an extended period sometimes requires patience alongside the initial courage to actually begin the process, allowing whatever genuinely needs to unfold to do so at whatever pace the specific situation actually requires, rather than forcing immediate, complete resolution before the natural process has had adequate time to genuinely develop. Picture the specific difference between forcing a door open all at once, potentially causing unnecessary damage in the process, and gradually, deliberately opening it wider over time, allowing whatever lies behind it to be revealed and addressed at a pace that genuinely serves the situation rather than one dictated purely by impatience or a desire for immediate, complete resolution. Most genuinely significant matters benefit from this more gradual approach, even while the initial decision to begin opening the door at all deserves the immediate attention this message has been encouraging throughout its content. This does not mean patience should become another sophisticated justification for continued postponement of the initial step itself. It means that once genuine engagement has actually begun, continued patience regarding the pace of subsequent development often serves better than impatient demand for immediate, complete resolution that the specific situation may not actually be capable of providing within an unreasonably compressed time frame. Here is a further consideration worth holding as you continue engaging with whatever this reflection has helped you identify as the specific door this message is asking you to finally open. Genuine spiritual guidance, of the kind this message is attempting to offer, rarely requires abandoning reasonable judgment or careful consideration entirely. It simply asks for genuine engagement rather than continued avoidance, while still allowing whatever reasonable care and thoughtfulness any significant matter genuinely deserves as it continues unfolding beyond this initial moment of recognition and beginning. Consider what balance between timely engagement and continued reasonable care might actually look like for your own specific situation. Timely engagement might mean beginning today, taking that first small step already discussed, rather than continuing to postpone indefinitely. Continued reasonable care might mean allowing subsequent steps to unfold thoughtfully, with appropriate consideration, rather than rushing toward premature resolution simply for the sake of quickly completing what genuinely requires more patient, careful development over time. Here is something worth understanding about why heaven, or whatever term feels most comfortable to your own particular spiritual framework and language, continues knocking rather than simply respecting your apparent choice to leave the door closed and moving on toward someone more immediately receptive. This persistence reflects genuine care rather than any punitive or coercive intention. Whatever has been trying to reach you continues doing so precisely because it recognizes something valuable available to you specifically, something worth continuing to offer even amid repeated postponement, rather than simply giving up and directing that same energy towards someone else entirely. This persistent care deserves genuine gratitude rather than continued dismissal or avoidance. Consider what it would mean to actually receive this persistence as evidence of genuine value being offered specifically to you, rather than treating it as simply one more demand competing for your already limited time and attention. Countless other demands and distractions filling your ordinary daily life. Here is something worth understanding about what genuinely changes once this particular door has been opened, at least partially, through whatever first step you choose to take in response to this reflection. Opening a long closed door typically produces a kind of relief that extends beyond simply resolving the specific matter that had been knocking. It often produces broader relief as well, a sense of increased integrity, of no longer carrying the quiet weight of something known but avoided, of living with greater alignment between what you genuinely know matters and how you are actually choosing to spend your time and attention. Imagine, briefly, what this broader relief might actually feel like in your own body and daily experience, extending beyond simply the specific matter you have identified throughout this reflection. Perhaps a general sense of lightness that touches multiple areas of your life simultaneously, evidence that genuine engagement with one significant matter often produces benefits that ripple outward well beyond the specific boundaries of that original matter alone. This broader relief matters significantly, offering benefit that extends well beyond simply the specific matter addressed, touching your overall sense of authenticity and self-trust in ways that ripple outward into how you approach other areas of your life as well, once this particular pattern of avoidance regarding this specific matter has genuinely begun shifting towards something more honest and engaged. Consider the specific relationship between gratitude and genuine receptivity as you continue engaging with whatever this reflection has helped you identify, since approaching this process with genuine appreciation for the opportunity itself tends to create significantly more favorable conditions for authentic engagement than approaching it purely from obligation or pressure. Rather than treating this moment as one more demand requiring your attention, consider treating it as a genuine gift, an invitation towards something meaningful that has continued patiently waiting for you to become ready, however long that readiness has taken to develop. Reflect on what specifically feels genuinely valuable, even exciting, about the possibility of finally engaging with whatever has been knocking, distinct from whatever fear or resistance might also be present simultaneously. Both genuine excitement and genuine fear can coexist regarding significant change, and acknowledging the excitement specifically, rather than allowing fear to dominate your entire emotional experience of this moment, can help sustain motivation as you move forward into genuine engagement. Examine, too, what specific role trust might play as you continue this process. Trust not necessarily in a specific outcome or timeline, but in the genuine value of the process itself. Trust that engaging honestly with whatever has been knocking will ultimately serve you well, even if the specific path forward remains somewhat unclear from where you currently stand. This kind of trust does not require certainty about every detail of how things will eventually unfold. It simply requires enough confidence in the fundamental value of honest engagement to actually begin moving forward, rather than continuing to wait for a level of certainty that significant, meaningful change rarely offers in advance. Consider what specific daily or weekly practice might help sustain your connection to whatever this reflection has helped you identify, ensuring that today's initial engagement continues developing rather than fading back into the pattern of postponement that has likely characterized your relationship with this particular matter up until this point. This might mean brief, regular check-ins with yourself, honestly assessing continued progress. It might mean maintaining some form of written record, tracking small steps taken and insights gained along the way. It might mean simply returning periodically to this specific reflection, allowing its content to continue reinforcing your commitment even as the initial emotional intensity of first encountering it naturally diminishes somewhat over time. Here is a final significant consideration before this message moves toward its close. This knocking, whatever specific form it has taken in your own particular circumstances, has not persisted because something is wrong with you, or because you have somehow failed by not yet responding to it. Persistent knocking simply reflects genuine significance, something worth continuing to seek your attention precisely because it matters, rather than reflecting any deficiency or failure on your part for having not yet fully engaged with it. Release whatever shame or self-criticism might have accumulated regarding your previous postponement of this particular matter. Shame does not accelerate genuine engagement. It simply adds unnecessary additional weight on top of whatever difficulty already exists in facing this matter directly. Approach this moment instead with genuine self-compassion, recognizing that postponement is an extremely common human pattern, alongside genuine commitment to finally responding differently than you have responded to similar previous opportunities for engagement. Consider extending this same self-compassion toward yourself throughout the entire process ahead, not simply as a one-time gesture offered during this initial moment of reflection, but as an ongoing practice sustained throughout whatever continued engagement this particular matter genuinely requires. Difficult moments will likely arise as this process continues unfolding, and meeting those moments with self-compassion, rather than renewed self-criticism, tends to support sustained engagement far more effectively than harsh self-judgment ever manages to achieve. Before this message reaches its true close, take one final moment for yourself, genuinely absorbing what has emerged throughout this reflection rather than rushing immediately toward whatever comes next in your day. Name, specifically, what this knocking has actually been about in your own particular life. Name, specifically, the first small step you intend to take today or within the next day, moving this matter from the category of things perpetually avoided into the category of things actively being addressed. This does not need to feel dramatic or overwhelming in order to matter significantly. It simply needs to feel genuine, real engagement rather than another moment of temporary reflection quickly forgotten once this message ends and your attention naturally returns to whatever else occupies your ordinary day. Trust that this particular message reached you today for a genuine reason, connecting specifically to something already knocking within your own awareness rather than arriving randomly or without relevance to your actual circumstances. Something in you recognized enough significance to continue reading this far, past the point where you might have closed this message earlier had it genuinely carried no connection to anything significant currently present in your own life. Consider, too, what it might mean to continue checking in with yourself over the coming days regarding whatever door you have begun opening today, recognizing that genuine resolution often requires sustained engagement beyond this single initial moment of reflection and commitment. Perhaps setting aside a few minutes each day, or each week, to honestly assess whether you are continuing to move forward with whatever process this reflection has helped you begin, rather than allowing initial motivation to simply fade once the immediate impact of this particular message has passed. Reflect, as well, on who in your life might offer genuine support as you continue this process beyond today, someone who can offer encouragement without either dismissing the genuine significance of what you are addressing or reinforcing whatever fear or avoidance kept this door closed for as long as it remained closed prior to this reflection. If such a person exists in your life, consider reaching out to them, sharing at least part of what has emerged through this particular reflection, allowing their support to help sustain your continued engagement over the coming days and weeks ahead. Consider, too, what specific obstacles are most likely to arise as you continue this process, obstacles worth anticipating now rather than being caught entirely unprepared when they eventually arise during the coming days and weeks. Old patterns of avoidance may attempt to reassert themselves, particularly once the immediate emotional impact of this message begins to fade. Practical complications may arise that make continued engagement feel more difficult than it did in this initial moment of clarity and commitment. Whatever specific obstacle feels most likely for your own particular situation, briefly considering how you might respond to it in advance can help you navigate it more effectively when it actually arises, rather than being caught entirely unprepared by a difficulty you had not previously anticipated or considered. Think about what genuine progress will actually look like over the coming weeks, recognizing that most significant matters worth genuinely addressing rarely resolve completely within a single conversation or action. Progress more often looks like continued, honest engagement over time, gradual movement toward genuine resolution, even if that resolution takes considerably longer to fully develop than you might initially hope given the intensity of clarity present in this particular moment of first receiving this message. There is one more layer worth adding before this message truly comes to its close, something practical that helps ensure this moment of genuine recognition actually translates into sustained action over the coming days and weeks rather than remaining simply another passing reflection. Consider what specific accountability might genuinely support your continued engagement, recognizing that significant, meaningful change often proves more sustainable when it is not attempted in complete isolation. Whether through a trusted friend, a family member, a therapist, or some other supportive relationship, sharing your intention to genuinely address whatever has been knocking often creates enough external accountability to help sustain momentum through the inevitable moments when internal motivation alone begins to feel insufficient on its own. Reflect, too, on how you might handle the specific moments when doubt or difficulty arise during this continued process, moments that are genuinely likely to occur regardless of how clear and certain today's initial recognition currently feels. These moments of doubt do not indicate that your original recognition was somehow mistaken. They simply reflect the natural fluctuation that accompanies any genuine process of significant change, particularly during the early stages before concrete, visible progress has had sufficient time to develop and become clearly apparent to you. When these moments of doubt eventually arise, consider returning to this specific reflection, rereading whatever sections felt most significant during this initial encounter, allowing the content to reinforce your original commitment even as its initial emotional intensity has naturally softened somewhat with the passage of time. Consider, 2. Reaching out to whatever support person you have identified, sharing the specific doubt currently being experienced rather than allowing it to operate silently, potentially derailing your continued engagement without ever being brought into open, honest conversation with someone who might offer valuable perspective or encouragement. Examine what specific evidence of genuine progress you might look for over the coming weeks, evidence that would help confirm that authentic movement is actually occurring, even when that movement unfolds gradually rather than through one single, dramatic moment of complete resolution. Perhaps a growing sense of lightness or relief connected to whatever matter you have begun addressing. Perhaps concrete developments in whatever specific action you identified as your initial step. Perhaps simply an increased capacity to think and speak about this matter with greater ease and clarity than was previously available to you before this particular process of genuine engagement began. Consider keeping some simple record of this continued process, brief notes tracking what steps you have taken, what insights have emerged, what shifts you have noticed as you continue moving forward from this initial moment of recognition and commitment. This record becomes valuable not only in the present, offering encouragement during more difficult moments, but also later, allowing you to look back with genuine clarity at how far this process has actually carried you, evidence that can be difficult to fully appreciate without this kind of ongoing documentation, given how gradually genuine, lasting change typically unfolds compared to how quickly and dramatically it is sometimes portrayed in more compressed, simplified narratives. Reflect, finally, on what it would mean to genuinely trust that whatever has been knocking has done so out of care rather than obligation or coercion, offering you something genuinely valuable that continues waiting patiently for your readiness, however long that readiness has taken to develop up until this current moment. This trust does not require abandoning reasonable judgment or careful, thoughtful consideration as you continue this process. It simply invites a fundamental orientation of openness and genuine receptivity, allowing whatever has been knocking to finally be received fully, rather than continuing to be held at a comfortable but ultimately costly distance. This message reached you today for a reason. Trust that. Carry it with you. And when you are ready, not before, not because anyone told you to, but when you are genuinely ready, take your next step. Deep down, you already know what that step is. Thank you for receiving this message today, for choosing to finally open the door rather than continuing to let the knocking pass by unanswered. Be gentle with yourself as you continue engaging with whatever has been waiting on the other side, one honest, deliberate step at a time.